Welcome to the Living Medicine podcast, where we talk about ethical medical use of psychedelic psychotherapy, teaching skills, examining the issues, and interviewing interesting people. Now let's start today's show.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Sandy Newis, and I am the podcast host for Living Medicine. And Living Medicine is sponsored by the Living Medicine Institute, which is a business where we provide content, resources, and training for clinical and medical professionals who are interested in deepening or launching a career into psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, focusing currently on ketamine. And I'm one of the lead trainers there. And I also do ketamine assisted psychotherapy full time, specializing in trauma, primarily in nervous system regulation. So I am very excited today to have Dr. Dana Lerman here, and I'll get into how I met her, but I'm very excited to have her on. So more formally, she got her MD at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. She went on to do her internal medicine residency at Mount Sinai Hospital and a fellowship in infectious diseases at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And she has worked as an infectious disease consultant all over the United States for over 10 years. She went on to do some work in COVID and began to identify herself as a wounded healer and begin her own mental wellness journey, which led her to an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica. And it sounds like she's one of those people that, kind of like heard the call and dramatically shifted. And she said, her passion shifted focus, and she's received training and certification in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and also with trauma through PESI, internal family systems, and ecotherapy. And she's the co-founder of Starlight Clinical Research and Skylight Psychedelics, and she also volunteers with Zendo Project as a sitter, medical triage, shift leader, and supervisor at Burning Man. So, all right, I love that. I kind of joke around about checking all the different psychedelic buckets and all the different psychedelic boxes in the psychedelic pedigree. And that's a lot of spots on the train. So I just like to always kind of say, how I know you. And so I first met you as the founder of Skylight Psychedelics when we were looking for prescribers for ketamine assisted psychotherapy for the training program. And I met you as kind of a businesswoman, like an MD businesswoman. And that was one of the faces that I met. And then later conversation, we had a nice long conversation about Burning Man. And I was actually intrigued about what you were planning for your camp as a fellow burner myself. And then the next round of conversations was about psilocybin and talking about your new center that you're opening, which I hope you'll tell us about too. But really kind of dialing into that indigenous perspective around that, which I really appreciate and respect, and we'll get into. And now I'm talking to you, and you're in the jungle in Colombia. So that's like
it sounds so ridiculous, but also amazing and on point.
Right. It's very psychedelic culture, and I love it. So I think it's great. I love that you're sitting here talking to us from the jungle. So welcome, and thank you again for being here. Tell us about your journey. Like, how did you come to be in this field? You made this like dramatic shift from infectious diseases, which I actually didn't know, into psychedelics, and it sounds like you did a like both feet jump. So kind of just tell us a little bit about that. How did you come to be here, and what led you to kind of this place and time?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. It's nice to see you, as always.
Nice to see you as well.
So I've been a physician since 2006. I ended up doing a fellowship in infectious disease and spent most of my career in infectious disease. In the pandemic, I started a COVID consulting practice and national testing and business risk mitigation practice. And I also went and worked out at hospitals in California when my colleagues were really struggling. They weren't seeing their families for months. And so I was very, I had a very, like when you hear about coronavirus and the things that went on in the news, you hear about like this story happened, like their colleagues are on ventilators. This story happened. There's morgue trucks. All of that happened to me.
Right.
The morgue trucks, my colleagues on ventilators, rounding on my own colleagues. And just every piece of the like my father being sick, my father, was on Fox News without a mask on, and like this whole political crazy shit show that was going on. It was like a total challenge in every possible capacity.
So you were just like in it.
Front line.
Like deep in it.
deep in it and deep in every single part of that pandemic. Like the
Mm,
political thing was very challenging. We
mm,
definitely didn't need that. Like we could have just all been on the same page, but
totally.
we weren't. And so it was a very challenging experience.
Mm,
Um, but then I ended up really struggling. Like I was
yeah,
so tired, burnt out. I was so overdosing on media exposure because I was reading every article that came out about coronavirus and I was
right.
watching it on like multiple televisions at one time.
Ugh.
And it was
Well, I
like,
mean,
it's
I can just
toxic.
only imagine. It's like this is what you trained for, right?
Right.
I mean, on some level, if you're doing infectious disease work, and I don't know, there's not that many
Yeah.
people who have a MD level specialty in infectious diseases. So I can only imagine that you're both like fascinated, but also feeling a very acute sense of responsibility.
A
Like,
hundred percent.
if
And we
not who,
definitely, yeah,
then us, then who's going to save us from this?
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And the thing is that we definitely trained for it, but we also did not. You
Yeah.
don't get training for a viral pandemic. That's
Mm,
not a thing that happens. You don't get any preparation for not knowing how to help your patients. Like it's a
uh,
very rare day in infectious disease when we don't have an option or some sort of offering. We had
uh,
no offering. We had oxygen, and we didn't know anything. We didn't give steroids. Like we didn't do things that we should have been doing, but because we didn't know, we didn't want to hurt anybody. So it
really.
was a crazy time, and this like feeling of like
Oh my
just general
God.
helplessness. General helplessness was very real,
Hmm.
and young patients dying like all over the hospital. People sharing ventilators, like the thing, husbands and wives in the same room, and one of them dying. Like it's
Ugh.
and then the other one just kind of waiting. More it's crazy stuff. There's endless stories, but I ended up needing to do something else. I
Mhm.
needed to get out of it, and I
Mm.
didn't know what I was going to do, but I reflected very fondly of my, childhood and when I was 16 and I did a ton of LSD. And I think that allowed me, honestly, I think that really fostered my ability to think outside the box
Mm.
and just like kind of look at things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And so I heard about psychedelic assisted therapy, and I wasn't a therapist. I'm like, but I'm allowed to enroll in this course. Why don't I
Right.
just do this?
Yeah.
And so I enrolled in the course. And when you go onto this, there's like pre-recorded videos that you watch before you start.
Yeah.
Rick Doblin comes on, from this attic, this super interesting room that he's in, and everyone's probably like, "What? Where is he? Like, what's
That's
happening back there?" But it
so
was so
funny.
interesting that he wasn't like needing to, prep like the backdrop. He just
Hmm.
it was right,
It's like
and
you in
so
the
he gets
jungle right
on. Yeah, and he gets on and he's like, listen, if you want to work with these medicines, you need to work with these medicines. You
now.
need
Yeah.
to experience these medicines because you're really
Yeah.
not gonna, and I'm obviously not quoting him, I'm just, giving a
Right.
generalization of what it was, that like in order for you to understand what this is like for people, you have to do it yourself. And
Yeah.
also even further, like you probably got to do it yourself anyway, because I don't know who doesn't. So
That's so funny.
um
That's so Rick. He was on the
yeah,
podcast too, talking about a similar thing.
yeah. And at the same time, my little brother was telling me that his best friend just went to an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica,
Uh-huh.
and he's going to go. And then my dad's going. So my brother went first, then my father went,
Oh,
and then I went.
you're like,
So I
okay.
went in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm.
Um, I actually showed up at this ayahuasca retreat wearing a hat that said vaxxed. Vaxxed. Okay. I was
Classic.
so like, I was so infectious disease. And when you show up at with a vax hat on at an ayahuasca retreat, like most, medicine people do not do any vaccines.
Right.
So it's a huge clash for me coming from Western infectious disease trained background and then up against the medicine family who
Right.
thinks, that I have nanobots. So
Right.
like there's a, you
But
know,
also, let's just kind of like, I want to just offer a moment of deep compassion about like just how hijacked your nervous system would have been. I mean, just
mhm.
how like utterly unexpectedly traumatic and traumatized you must have been on some level.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, actually.
I mean, just like your nervous system must have just been completely just.
Yeah, from just the thought of the pandemic alone, and that my children were at risk and my family was at risk and that I was at risk. But the yeah, just in general helplessness, like every piece of it
Totally.
was incredibly dysregulating, and the amount of flooding of my system with media, toxic media,
Mm,
made it so much worse.
totally. Yeah.
So
So you show up at this retreat wearing a Vax hat,
yeah,
bumping straight up against kind of, the medicine world, which
yeah,
is different, you know. Um,
yeah. I didn't wear my Vax hat after that. I felt it. I felt it, and I was like, okay, I got
right.
to shift my perspective here.
Totally. So you showed up as Dr. Lerman.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
Dr. Lerman showed up in the medicine. And
Uh-huh.
Dr. Lerman is the doctor of my system. And
Uh-huh.
then La Doctora, who
Mm.
is Mother Ayahuasca, and my
Mm-hmm.
doctor had a face off, basically.
Oh, how interesting. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And my system, my doctor was like, we don't need you here. We already have a doctor.
Wow.
We know what's best for this system.
Mm.
And then it just was leveled. But my kept fight, like my ego was literally army crawling across the floor. Like I was really hard to put down,
Mm.
um,
Mm. I'm
which
sure.
wasn't surprising to me, right?
Right.
And I didn't trust it. I didn't know what I was doing. I
Right.
didn't get appropriate preparation.
Yeah.
I had no clue what I was doing. The first night I was completely blasted out to outer space.
Mm-hmm.
There's some medicine ceremonies where you go where every single person gets the same dose.
Yeah.
There's a huge room full of people, like 80 people, and it's crazy chaotic energy, and you're like freaking out outside by yourself. And there was definitely some supportive people there, but I think preparation is really important.
That's so funny because I have talked a little bit about this here, but most people don't know this. I basically went sight unseen to Brazil for a month doing Santo Daime, which is very similar, like similar plants, different prayers and different lineage. And I don't recommend doing that either. And sometimes that's just what it takes and how it gets you there, but I don't recommend
Yeah,
it. Like,
yeah, yeah,
it's not that cool, really.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, without the preparation, you could really do a lot of harm, I think. And I was
mhm.
thinking about this actually in my medicine journey the other night, like
Yeah,
in the Hippocratic Oath, and first do no harm. Yeah, it's something that we don't really think about a lot, and I think we need to think about it more in psychedelics, actually.
right.
Yeah,
Well, I was kind of thinking that we might talk about that at the end, but as long as you brought it up, like, let's just go there. Like, I
yeah,
share that view, right? Like, or we can wait for a minute and talk about a few other things, whatever your preference is.
I'm happy to go anywhere.
But how do we in the psychedelic world, and I specifically try to focus in the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy lane, but there's a lot of crossover. Um, how do we do no harm? Like, what do we need? Those of us who facilitate, those of us who lead, but also as a field, as we move towards the coalescing of a field, like, what do we need to keep in mind and how can we do harm?
Yeah. Um, I think that harm can happen in many ways. I think when someone is ill prepared for a ceremony, it is it can be completely dysregulating and really cause people to just honestly spiral into
Yeah.
suicidality, homicide out, like any different thing. And
Hmm.
so also then the question of, and I know we chatted about this before, is like, how do you actually acquire informed consent for a psychedelic journey? Like how is
Right.
someone informed of like all the crazy that can actually happen in there?
Hmm.
And it's like I think that people really need to have a good understanding of the different places and the different experiences that someone could have. And that this may not be healing. Maybe in the end, it ends up being healing. And this is part of your journey that you got to go through the shit to get to this other place. But it can be
Hmm.
incredibly dysregulating. And you don't know if if and when that's going to happen.
Right.
Like have a lot of friends in my ayahuasca community that just people have had really challenging stuff. People who have been drinking medicine for a long time and then all of a sudden have a ceremony and they're suicidal,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then they drink more medicine to come out of that. And like it's very tricky and it can be it is not a joke and it is not something to be fucked with. It's a very
Yeah.
serious, right? Because you
Yeah.
also like, you could see when people are on medicine and all these different parts come out, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
full on like DID right there. Like that's what is happening in that moment. Like all of these different parts of them and their baby part, like little kids are talking. I mean, being in ceremony and hearing someone talking and like that they're a 4-year-old child right now. Like it is,
Yeah.
you know? And then but ensuring, and you can't even ensure that like all the parts of them are going to kind of come back into the system and
Right.
like, and not be stuck out there like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally
Totally.
regulating the person.
Well, and
And
what I have seen too is, transpersonal, experiences, kind of, people having otherworldly experiences or, otherworldly beings coming into the space that they
yeah,
don't have any way to integrate into their reality.
right.
And,
Yeah.
in an indigenous world, we would be doing this with people who've trained for a lifetime, for generations, about how to hold this space. And
Hmm.
here we are in the Western world, just like charging ahead with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure, why not? I hear it's good.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that a lot of us in Western culture don't really appreciate the spiritual realms that the taitas and the shamans really are communing with during the whole ceremony. We think that they're doing these other things, but they're actually in this other realm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
in
and
the
we're so
jungle,
hungry for it. I mean, I think in the West, we're just so hungry for the sacred that we're like looking
right?
for people to lead us into that. And how do we know who our teachers are? How do we know who our leaders are? How do we know who we can trust to hold
Yeah,
that? And how do they know that there's somebody that they can be trusted to hold that? Like
yeah,
who's their backup? There's a lot of
yeah.
layers.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Oh, I'm just kind of reflecting. There's a lot of layers.
there's a ton of layers, and also, when you find your medicine community, sometimes that changes.
Mm,
And people, I think a lot of in the psychedelic space is kind of people are going around to like different things and trying to like find their people and find their community. And also knowing that like, people put taitas and shamans on like this pedestal that
mm,
they have to be perfect and they
mm,
can never be out of alignment because they sit with the medicine and they train with the medicine since they were 6. But I honestly like it's just bullshit. I mean, they're human beings and they're susceptible
right.
to all the shit, and luckily they have medicine that they can go to. And, it's just, this is something that I'm really like experiencing a lot lately. Um, and not abandoning a group or someone because of their humanness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. No, I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting because I think along with this being hungry for the sacred, what I see is we have a tendency to elevate, and people may themselves elevate themselves, people who, profess to have a, higher level connection to the other world. And, that may be true in some cases, but they're also human people with faults and, personalities and all of that. And at the same time, how do we deal with like psychedelic evangelism? Like I've seen the light and now I know the thing or the
Hmm.
things. And, though, I mean, those are just, I think, some of the do no harm kind of pieces to hold. Like, how can we be human, but also be safe and not get into this hierarchical ordering?
Yeah. Yeah. I am completely on board with all of it, Sandy. I
Yeah.
think,
Well, and it's
yeah.
interesting because, like, because I don't know, because, like, and then I'm going to kind of move into kind of indigenous perspectives because I know that's a really big piece for you. But I studied with Malidoma for several years, Malidoma Some, and he would always say, in the village, it's just the way it is. Like, you have your sense of purpose. It's identified from the time you're young. Everybody has their purpose. And, doesn't mean everybody's awesome, but you kind of know what that is. And everybody's, so there isn't the same kind of hierarchical ordering of gifts
uh,
because everybody has their purpose.
yeah.
I see people in the Western world wanting to kind of move into that. So,
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
yeah,
Got a long way to go.
yeah. But so, here you are in a village in Colombia. And when we first spoke in depth about this, I was really drawn to how passionate you were about honoring the indigenous roots of the medicine and particularly plant medicines. So, what do you think is important about that? I mean, I know when I say it, that sounds obvious, but I think it's important to really dig in and like operationalize that. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean in real time?
So one time I was in Costa Rica and I sat with a Taita, and there was an Iranian man in the ceremony.
Mm.
And we were
Mm.
all sitting, like it was like ceremony, that's the time after the ceremony where everyone's talking
Mm.
about their experiences.
Mhm.
And so this Iranian man was called to work with Yahe, the Colombian ayahuasca.
Mm.
And he said to the Taita, like, I'm Iranian. I'm not Colombian.
Yeah.
How do you feel about us, you know, walking this path and hoping to serve medicine one day?
Mhm.
And he said that in order for the medicine tradition to stay alive,
Yeah.
that there has to be people who are non-indigenous to the area to carry the medicine, because a lot of people who are indigenous to the area are not called to do that. The
Mm.
Taita's children sometimes are not called to do that. And so
Mm.
then who else is going to do it if one of us doesn't, right? And so
Interesting.
it was really beautiful to hear that they weren't like gatekeeping, and I'm sure that there are some Taitas or shamans who think differently, but it was cool to hear that actually. Um, and I think it's important to, preserve the sacredness of the medicine and these experiences and these people that have trained their whole lives. Like, there's something very different about drinking. I haven't done this, but I have friends who has, like, drinking ayahuasca in Kentucky in a laundromat, right?
Right.
With a shaman who, I don't know, like how long, maybe they just like, did some training and kind of showed up and are just pouring ayahuasca, versus
Right.
like drinking medicine with a Taita who was raised in this lineage, drinking medicine since he was 6 years old, serving
Mhm.
medicine since he was 15. And to be able to serve medicine in this community, they have to go through a rigorous, like that's not even the right word. Like, it's like brutal
Right.
initiation with the medicine that we drink in ceremony. We typically drink a shot glass full. They are drinking coconuts full. Okay. Coconuts full of medicine,
Coconuts for
and
days.
coconuts for days, and they can't purge.
Oh,
If they
interesting.
purge, it starts over.
Oh, wow.
So, it's a different level of training and commitment,
Right.
So I
Well,
think
it's like full immersion. It's like full
yeah,
immersion versus,
like anything.
taking a course.
Exactly. Right. And a lot of us in the Western world, like, cannot do full immersion, right? Like, we have kids. We also live in the West, and we've got, all of these other things that we're doing and jobs. And like, how can you kind of abandon your career and your family and go down to the jungle and just drink medicine for 6 months?
Right.
That's
Well, but that's interesting, right? Because it's like, okay, how do we then? Because people are, and it's happening both with ayahuasca and, psilocybin and other sacred plants. And, then there's obviously the synthetics, which I think are different, but do, I think, open a portal. Um, so, what if we're going to take this indigenous perspective, which is these are sacred plants, and you're raised in a lineage, and you essentially are raised into this, and you devote your life to this, and you live this on all the levels, and you have a lineage that's been passed down through multiple generations. Like, would you say more about that? Like, is there more? Is there part that I'm missing? Because the next piece of this is like, what pieces of this can we apply in the Western world? So I want to make sure that I'm kind of encapsulating it.
I think that the importance of having a lineage is, I think it's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And what does a lineage even mean, though? Like, what, you know, in the Western, in the West, we kind of have these, like, we obviously have our ethnic lineages, but then we have mentors who come from different lineages, but are sharing their experience with us, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, like that, I mean, I think for a lot of us, we don't have a lot of culture. A lot
Right.
of us, like, don't have these cultural elements that they have. And then in the psychedelic community, I think we find that, like, with our
Mm,
people, and we kind of like acquire things and are kind of making our own thing, right? Like, and I think that happens a lot. Like these a lot of psilocybin ceremonies are, people who have gone and drank ayahuasca and learn that there and then bring it
totally.
into that medicine. And so it's like it's becoming this kind of multicultural type of ceremony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how to do that and not appropriate,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and the thing that I wonder about is how do we take what we learned and apply it in a Western context, which is different than
Mhm.
being raised in a village in the jungle.
Totally.
And,
It's so different.
yeah, like when I studied with Malidoma, it's interesting because that wasn't medicine work at all. That was just like deep elemental ceremony and ritual and ancestral medicine. And he said the exact same thing. He said, the indigenous world needs the Western world. And so I will teach you the way I do it and the way it's done in the village, and you will take it and apply it in the way you take it. And we were all like, but how, and he's like, we need each other. This will
Yeah.
not survive. Like,
Right.
the Westerners need to take the indigenous wisdom and bring it, and the West also needs this indigenous wisdom, so the future is in the blending, like, so
Exactly. It's the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, right?
totally. Yeah.
It is that 100%. Um,
Right. So
yeah.
how do we what are your thoughts? How can Westerners be trained, taught? How do they become teachers? Can we learn in new ways? Does it become something different, and is that okay?
Yeah, I think that like anything, it's important to go and have the different experiences and not just read about them,
Yeah.
right? Like you got to go and you got to go to different spaces and ceremonies and feel and figure out what's what's your medicine? What's your
Yeah.
medicine? Where do
Yeah.
you identify the most? What calls you the most? And yeah, there are a lot of people I think in the psychedelic space who kind of find themselves here and then they go on the tour, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to do 5 and I'm going to
I've
do
got some
4 and
money.
I'm
I'm
going to
going to
do
go
3 and
I'm
I'm
on
going to do 2C
ayahuasca
and I'm
tour.
going to
I hear these people
yeah,
are cool. They play good music. Cool people go
right.
there.
Yeah. But like when you stay with one medicine, then you're like developing and cultivating a relationship. It's kind of
Mm.
like polyamory versus monogamy, right? It's like, can you have that level of relationship with everyone that you're polyamorous with versus that like deep depth commitment relationship with your monogamous partner? And I'm not shitting on polyamory whatsoever. I'm
No, I
just
get it. It's
a
different.
parallel.
How do you stay together when things get hard?
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
Like, do
and
you?
developing relationship and that trust and I think that's a big piece for sure. And
Mm.
there's also, I don't know, I can go in 10 different places from this.
Well, it's interesting. What I just came up for me when we were talking about that is like, going on the tour. It's like, also, if you drink medicine with your village, whatever that looks like, doesn't have to be always the same people, but you get increasing trust in that. You're also going to get more gritty, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
can people see the dark stuff? Can people see the weird stuff? What if you show up and say and do weird things?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in the village, you don't really get to shun people for that,
Hmm.
but when you're on like psychedelic tour, you do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Psychedelic tour is it's a real phenomenon.
well, it
And
is.
it also, like a people, I think it also, this addiction to non-ordinary states of consciousness is also something that not a lot of people talk about and is very real
Mm.
when you're on the tour and you don't get off the bus to like go and sit in a coffee shop and talk. Do you know what I mean? Like you need
Right.
to unload that. Because that's we always say the work, I'm going to go and work, I'm doing the work, but it's like, are you? Are you just going on the tour? Like,
Right.
it's hard sometimes. It's so grueling in there, but it's like you gotta, like, I'm still trying to kind of pull out from last night's ceremony what was there for me. Like, and
Mhm.
sometimes on medicine, and it comes so quickly, all these messages, and you're just like, más despacio, por favor. Like, I need to go slowly. You need to
Yeah.
like give me time to kind, like, can I get my pen? And it's just like, no, you're just gonna do this, what I'm saying,
Right.
and so
Well, and it's not
I
all
don't.
bliss. That's where I get into the whole thing with, people ask me all the time because I work primarily, I mean, I work exclusively professionally with ketamine and have familiarity
Okay.
with other plant medicines. But to me, like, this is a me thing. I do not apply this to all people, but there is a qualitative and very significant difference in my experience working with the sacred plants versus working with the synthetics. And I find the synthetics to be much more predictable. Doesn't mean predictable is not bad. Like, let's be
Yeah.
clear. We're
Yeah.
just not engaging with another spirit being in this. It can open the portal to that, but it's not the same thing, like
Right.
to me. And
Yeah.
that is a question mark that I hold as we move into, bringing sacred plants into the mainstream, like the lack of predictability, because I think the sacred plants can do more harm. Um, and
Yeah.
just for the simple, be like spiritual emergency, inability to integrate things that come up. Um, and then there are the people who are just like, the one and done people who are like, I've seen the light and now I'm cured. And that's awesome. That has not been my lived experience. And,
Oh no.
like,
No.
and,
I've
and
never seen the light.
right. Still looking for
No.
the light.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the journey of trying to, see the light that actually is the work. So, but I think it's important to kind of just name that. And I don't know, do you feel that way? Because I say that to a lot of people. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Psilocybin, synthetics to me means ketamine, MDMA, LSD.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's less like an entity is present when it's more synthetic, when it's synthetic medicine. To
Yeah.
me, it's more of like a human spirit that's around.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's a totally different world when there's plant teacher, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So we share that. And
Yeah.
not a lot of people speak to that because I get asked that all the time. Like, will you, move into just training psilocybin? I'm like, not without some real relationship building with that plant spirit. Um,
Yeah. Right.
and
I mean, there's so many, right, people who serve medicine and like, this is a tool, this is just something in our toolbox. We're going to take this pill or whatever. And it's like, that's what, I've learned in ayahuasca ceremony is introduce yourself to the medicine. Like, this is your
mm,
teacher, spirit and
mhm,
essence, and there you are communing with it. You are
mhm.
not using it. Like, don't say you use psychedelics. It like drives me totally crazy. Like,
Yeah.
we are, right, working with these beings and teachers that are of the universe. Like, they know
Mhm.
everything.
Right. Yeah.
Brilliant, like brilliant, brilliant medicine, and tricky, and like tricks you sometimes and tests you sometimes. And it's just like, you know, crazy. But people really, need a community. And, you can have a big ayahuasca experience, go to the jungle, and then you go home and you have nobody. And it's not going to be good.
No. So this is kind of a question that, is kind of like we didn't talk about, but a lot of people who have been on this show really have talked about hearing the call. Like when I said, "Oh, you've heard the call," like it was like yes, this is a thing. And I
Hmm.
hear it when people come to the training program at Living Medicine Institute. I hear it all the time that people are just like feel like I've been called. I mean, I personally feel like I was like summoned by the
Hmm.
Iowa plant. And
Hmm.
um and so, if that were the case, that the ayahuasca beings, if we're going to call them that, ayahuasca spirit of the plants, are summoning all or some of the humans, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do they want? Why do they wish us to come to them?
Yeah. So
And
I
that
think
may
we
be, I
work,
mean, to
I
answer
think,
that at whatever level you want, but it's an interesting kind of thought about like following the like hearing the call piece?
So I feel very strongly about this, and I felt it ever since I started working. Uh, I was saying working for medicine. Like
Yeah.
I know that I work for the medicine.
Yeah.
I know. It's like, and I know that people have heard my story and have then gone and had their own experience. And I've seen it in my friends and I've seen it in my family and see it with clients, right? And I'm very open and transparent with my clients about the
Mm,
work that I do. And I mean, I'm here with another physician, and then he has shared his experiences with his colleagues in the
yeah.
ICU, right?
Right.
And then they go and drink medicine. Like this is how this works.
Right.
People are drinking medicine, and it's not. It's all different types of people. Like
Mhm.
the amazing. Um, I don't know what word I want to use, but like the amazing, really just group that has intentionally shown up here, and the different people and where their backgrounds are and what they do for work, and then we get in there, and we're all the same.
Mhm.
We're all the same and we're all doing it, and it's challenging and it's ugly and we feel gross and but it's like, it doesn't, it's so bonding, obviously, as you know, it's like an incredibly
Yeah.
bonding experience for people.
It's interesting because the last guest that hasn't actually even come out yet is Dr. Jason Connor. He's launching a platform to psychedelic oncology. So he's an oncology doc, like retired or retiring from Mount Sinai, where you also went. And
Nice.
a similar story, not quite the
Yeah.
same, but elements of that. Like, and
Yeah,
he, very committed to, you know, bringing that wisdom to cancer patients and their families.
for sure. I was talking about this the other day that, like, psychedelic medicine is like internal medicine, right? People don't think about like internal medicine as a field of medicine, and psychedelic medicine is a field of medicine, and there will be psychedelic medicine subspecialties, right? Oncology, high risk psychedelics. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on of like the different niches that people can go down, which is super cool because you can become more and more, specialized and in
Right.
yeah, and really understanding. Yeah, it's a critical piece.
Yeah. Well, so another piece that we kind of hit on before is kind of this kind of rolls into the training piece. Like, how do we train with this? But, the importance of the experiential lens. Like, one of the things that I find in, deep psychedelic culture is like the realization that, once you've heard the call, like once you commit, like my Melodoma used to say this, like once you've committed to the ritual, you're in the ritual. Like whether you're
Mhm.
doing it or not is not the point. You're not all like getting to the ritual. You are in the ritual, the
Right.
getting to the building, the creating, the prepping for it is the ritual. And that experiential lens, is something that I also bring to ketamine work, like especially retreats. Like, all the way you do one thing is the way you do all things, and it tells you something about yourself. So I'm just curious, not just again, what are your thoughts on like it's not just the medicine. Like it's not like we do all these things just to drink the medicine. It's the way an person engages with the entire experience. Like, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
how we can learn from that, teach that? How can you, any tips for people about that?
I mean, I think it's every piece of it needs to be kind of fully examined and explored, right? It's like
Mm,
first of all, like what what medicine are you called to? What is that, like that listening and what that even feels like?
mm,
And then it's like then that preparation work that starts, and someone really understanding where where sort of they could possibly go in these experiences, and really understanding, like, I could tomorrow be maniacal, right? I could tomorrow be suicidal. I
mm,
could tomorrow be one with the universe and God and all things, right? Like I could see my a sexual trauma from childhood, right? Those are
mhm.
things that people need to know so
Yeah.
they can actually give real informed consent. You could become paralyzed in a ceremony, right?
Mm,
It's unlikely to persist, but
right.
you cannot move. You can need to go to the restroom and you can't go. And you can
Hmm.
even also lose your ability to speak to me, and that and you can't speak English all of a sudden. You're speaking in a primitive language.
Right.
Like,
We're speaking in tongues.
all of these things, right? You could become homicidal in an experience,
Mm-hmm.
and what we are going to do to help you work through that, right? And
Mm,
how we are not going to abandon you or leave you alone, right? That you will have people who will be here with you and like really laying out what does touch look like? I mean, there's some seriously fucked up shit going on in the psychedelic community.
correct.
Serious shit,
Yeah.
right? Who is in the ceremony with you? Who's helping? How many people are there, right? I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
you hear about these huge ceremonies. I know someone who went to a big ceremony, and he's a man, and next to him were two women. And during the ceremony, he was deep in the medicine and touched one of the women.
Mm.
And for sure, that is not okay, but for
Right.
sure, that is also not his fault because
Mm,
it's the job of the taita or the shaman or the assistants that they are watching what's going on in that space.
right.
And then that person was actually sent home from the ayahuasca experience because of that. And that is like the shame and the shit that
Oh,
comes with
yeah.
that. Like it's totally crazy,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm off on a. I can keep
No, but I
going.
hear well, here's what I got out of that. One is the importance of safety, right? A safe, well held, well cared for container in terms of the
Yeah.
assistants and the people that are holding it who know what they're doing. There
Yeah.
is the we're all in this together and a lot of weird stuff can come up. And so, what is the learning there? How do we hold safety, but how do we not judge? How do we not shame? But how do we
Mhm.
also keep things safe for the other participants? That is a
Yeah.
very tricky dance for
Mhm.
facilitators, regardless of your
Yeah.
background.
Yeah.
And then
I mean,
what do
there's a very
we do?
specific, yeah. Yeah, there's a very specific way to talk to people when they're on medicine. You have to really be so sensitive and careful with literally every word and every tone that comes out of your mouth. Because
Mhm.
even if you go over to someone in ceremony and tell them that they're snoring and it's disrupting other people, they could spiral into suicidality. Because I've
Right?
seen it,
Yeah,
and oh my God, I'm ruining everyone's experience, right?
totally.
And that becomes like the biggest thing.
Hmm.
So I think that there's it's just like,
Right.
yeah,
Or, well, when you were doing this, then I felt that, and that changed my experience. So therefore, I
right,
have a certain degree of energy towards you.
right.
And, how do we work with that? Because to me, that's part of the experiential lens. Like, that's interesting. Let's just be curious about that, which is a very simple way to encapsulate the experiential lens. But
Yeah,
it's difficult, to kind of track that and notice people's patterns as they come up with that, which to me is such a big part of the learning. Um,
yeah,
you know, well, how do I feel about the person snoring next to me? Like, what if I really, really hate it?
yeah. And that's another thing. And part of preparation is, people in this room are going to be going through things, or this person over here may be going through things, and you may be throwing up their shit. So, like, how do you got to teach people about that? That it's
Right.
not, you're not only purging for yourself sometimes. You may be the person who just is the purger, and they're doing the purging, and that it's not just their own shit.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because in medicine, there's sort of a required acceptance. Like most people, like, I mean, some will, or are not going to get up and start screaming at the person who's snoring or purging. They might, but like we kind of know that's breaking the frame. But I'm always kind of curious about, the noticing of the patterns that come up around that and how that applies to life outside, which is one of the places that I think some of the biggest learning comes from. Everybody thinks it's all the aha moment, but to me, there's so much about how we engage with the experience and how we engage with each other in the experience that is a lot where the learning is.
Sure.
So we just got a couple minutes left. From what I understand, what you said, you are in the process of either beginning or just on the verge of opening or a psilocybin center in Colorado. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah, so I was asked to be the medical director of a company called Entheogen. It's
Mm-hmm.
ENTEOGYN.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's a great group of people who are running the organization and really focusing a lot on, so it's a vertically integrated psilocybin healing center and community center. So they grow their own medicine and they're
Yep.
able to distribute to other licensed centers in Colorado. And they will serve their own medicine in the center. The center's 7,000 square feet in Golden, which is about 10 minutes from Red Rocks.
Cool.
And majority of it is focused on psilocybin therapy sessions, either individual or one-on-one, individual or group ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then there is also other opportunities to have different types of experiences with the medicine, pending you do all the, proper preparation and screening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's a pretty great team to be working with for sure.
Awesome. So, what do you think for people that are interested in such a thing? Because, you know, Colorado, it's, therapeutically legal. It's likely to be more so. What are the pieces from what we've been talking about or other things that you're going to bring in terms of building that program and that container and any sort of
Yeah,
training for practitioners? Like, what do you think are the core, like the most important elements?
I think the most important element is an Indigenous Advisory Council.
Mm,
That
hmm
to me is the most important.
hmm
Um, and really the way that we approach the medicine from that sacred, reverent space
hmm
and ensuring that we are not medicalizing as much as possible, even though
Yeah,
we have medical support, because obviously shit happens in these ceremonies. We know that it happens, and it's nice to have medical support when it's happening.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how therapists are navigating those spaces where people are, they're feeling like they're dying and they actually could be dying sometimes, right? So like
Right.
figuring out
Therein
like,
lies the dilemma. How do you know?
is this real cardiac chest pain? Or is
Right.
this, a manifestation of a childhood trauma
hmm
coming, right?
Right.
Like, so, yeah. So, at Entheogen, we have a nurse who's present, in the space for all journeys. So if there's any
hmm
medical issue, then the nurse can go in. And then I'm also on call I'm also there in the center, but I'm also on call, for the center for every experience. So,
Okay.
yeah, and again, like the Indigenous Advisory Board, I think is the most important thing, really,
hmm
really trying to minimize harm. And what happens in the psychedelic space, I have an amazing therapist who does decolonial work with me. They're
Mm.
an ayahuasquero from Ecuador,
Oh,
and so they've helped me so much over the last few years, and just learning about how to
mm.
minimize harm and not erase and steal and to give back. And Theogen is a public benefit corporation. So we
Interesting.
give
Okay.
back, to the community
Great.
for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, so, kind of switching gears, and then we'll finish up. But just, you also, I mean, you work with ketamine. So Skylight Psychedelics is you are, I don't know if you're still prescribing kind of most of the states for therapists. And, so just to kind of like bring it home, like, what of this applies to ketamine?
Yeah. Um, I think it's also important in ketamine spaces to not medicalize the experience, even though it is a pharmaceutical. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is very, it can be very ceremonial and spiritual and healing and connecting to the universe and similar feelings that we get from plant medicines.
Yeah.
Um, and hear all the time when people went to a intravenous ketamine clinic and, they're watching a podcast, listening to a podcast or watching a nature show,
Watching
sitting
TV.
lazy boy, and I'm like that. I mean,
Right.
it's not a bit, you don't have to like outfit your office in this particular way. Like you need a bed or a couch and an eye mask and some music and a
Right.
bucket and some cozy blankets and a pillow. Like you don't have to do anything crazy.
Right. That's so
So,
funny. I always tell people, I'm like, if a clinic has a television and they say watch Netflix, then just don't go.
right.
That
No.
means they don't know anything about the medicine. I mean, just like,
Yeah.
they haven't
And
done.
no support, right? Like people are going in there having these big experiences and they're afraid and they're alone. It's like, I
Right.
mean, can that be more helpful than no ketamine at all? For sure. I saw it save my best friend's life, and he went to a very medicalized ketamine experience.
hmm
But
hmm
what could he have had? should someone have been there with him during these experiences?
Sure.
Well, oh no.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so anything else that you want to share before we close? Any kind of like pressing last words, and then how can people find you?
Um, I think in terms of last words, I hope that people who are who are working with these medicines sit with these medicines, just like Rick said. It's couldn't have been more right on.
Totally.
And you don't know it until you really do it.
Right.
Yeah. And then just treating our plants with respect and love and care,
Mm-hmm. Nice. Good. And people can find you through Skylight Psychedelics. And I don't know if the center's open. Is the center open or opening?
It should be opening late spring to early summer.
Okay. All right.
And then I also take people to Burning Man at our camp, Aya the Tiger, AYA, thetiger.org. So if there's anyone listening who wants to join and be a part of a peer support camp at the Burn.
Right, which may lure me back to Burning Man one of these years. It's been a while.
You would love this camp. It's so great. And it's going to be bigger this year. So, and we're looking at a potential art car.
I love it. Well, thank you so, so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us and everything else. And it's really been a pleasure and a joy. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Sandy.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.